You see, one of the biggest misconceptions in the world of human relationships is what occurs when someone pulls away, when the person you love begins to back away, to shut off, to pretend they don't care. The majority of people take this personally. We begin to think, eat cold, they should be heartless. They just don't want me. But what if I told you most of the time that distance isn't about rejection, it's about protection? When a person is avoidant, when they abruptly appear disconnected, unapproachable, emotionally unavailable, it's not usually because they don't care, it's because they care so deeply that they have no idea what to do with what they're feeling. Avoidance put on masks, not because they love lying, but because that mask has been their survival mechanism. It's how they've learned to survive in a world that once warned them that love was risky. Maybe they grew up in a home where emotions weren't safe, where being vulnerable meant getting hurt, where love came and went unpredictably. And so, somewhere deep down, they made a silent promise: I'll never need anyone that much again. That's not cruelty, that's self preservation. That's fear dressed up as independence. So when you notice someone behaving as if they don't require you, when they brush aside connection, when they make conversations lightweight, when they put off eye contact following a conflict, don't be deceived by the performance. Behind that facade is someone who's afraid of being found out. Someone who has learned that each time they allow another and it leads to hurt, they're not denying love, they're struggling to make it last. And here's the reality: the more they care, that mask falls into place. Because the stakes are higher, the risk of getting hurt is greater. It's like being on a cliff. Part of you wants to leap into connection. The other part of you is shouting, "Don't you dare! You'll get hurt again." I've witnessed this in hundreds of relationships, thousands of stories. One person grasping for closeness with all their might, and the other person retreating. And what do? We pursue. We insist on answers. We tell them, "Why can't you just let down your guard?" But that just confirms their fear, because they're waiting to let you down. They're waiting for the moment when they let their imperfections shine through and the love will be gone. What they require isn't pressure, it's presence. They require someone who can penetrate behind the act. Someone who can say, "I recognize you're afraid. I see the wall, but I see what stands behind it too." Once you grasp the mask, you no longer respond to the behavior and instead react to the pain that lies behind it. You stop making their distance about your worth, and you start recognizing it as their way of saying, "I'm trying to protect myself." Consider this: all human beings desire love, but not all know how to accept it. Avoidants desire intimacy just as much as the rest of us, but intimacy is danger to them. It's like walking into flames they don't know if they can escape. And the worst part is, the instant they push away is most likely the instant they need to be reassured the most. When you can stand before somebody's avoidance and say, "I understand. You are not broken. You are afraid," the whole thing changes. The dynamic is no longer conflict, but compassion. You shift from offense, taking to understanding, building. And that's where healing starts. Don't call somebody cold or emotionally unavailable just yet. Step back, take a peek beneath the surface. Ask yourself, what are they guarding? Because what's hiding behind every avoidant mask is a human who's been hurt, somebody who wants to get close but's afraid of being rejected all over again. And when you greet that fear with empathy, not judgment, you make a space where the mask can at last be removed and the true person can begin to emerge. That's where change starts, not in rescuing somebody, but in learning them. When someone you love begins to distance themselves, your initial reaction may be to think, "They no longer love me." But more often than not, that couldn't be more wrong. Actually, many times emotional distance isn't a message of disinterest, it's a sign of emotional overloading. It's not that they've stopped feeling, they're feeling too much and don't know how to handle it. Consider this: when an avoidant individual suddenly becomes aloof, when they clam up after an instant of engagement, that's not them holding up a sign that reads, "You don't matter." That's their nervous system holding up a sign that says, "This is too much. I don't know if it's safe." They're not avoiding you, they're avoiding the flood within them. Most folks think avoidants are aloof, rational, unfeeling. But the reality is that they tend to feel things more intensely than other people do. They just lack the skills to manage those feelings. So rather than communicate what's going on inside, the fear, the hope, the vulnerability, they shut it all off. They retreat because they are suffocating, not because they don't care. Let's be real for a minute. Have you ever felt this much that it frightened you? Perhaps you cared for someone so intensely that it left you feeling vulnerable, open, undefended. That's precisely what an avoidant feels constantly when things get too intense. Intimacy awakens their worst fear, the fear of losing control or being hurt again if they open up fully. So they go back to the one place that's ever been safety distance. You'll see this behavior after a fantastic date, a deep conversation, or an epiphany moment. Suddenly they're quieter, less accessible. You begin questioning everything. What did I do? Did I say something in error? But what really happened is that their heart felt too much and their brain slammed on the emergency brake. It's emotional overload. Picture yourself trying to keep a current of water from rising that increases faster than you can manage it. Eventually, you back up just to catch your breath. That's what emotional distance actually is. It's them catching their breath. Now, here's where we tend to make it worse. We pursue, we text, call for clarity. But what that does is create an escalation of the overload. It puts more stress on a system already overburdened. And what do you get when you push an emotionally flooded person? They shut down even more. They go colder, quieter, further away. Not because they can help it, but because they must. It's their way of trying to regain control in a moment that seems out of control. But here's the secret: distance does not always equal disconnection. Sometimes it is part of their process in coming back. The avoidant withdraws to regain emotional balance, to be safe enough to return later. When you are able to get that, when you are able to hold steady rather than respond in panic, you provide them with the space to come back. You illustrate for them that your love is not conditional upon constant proximity, and that's strong because it shows their nervous system something new. That love doesn't have to have pressure, that intimacy doesn't have to hurt, that they can breathe within connection, not suffocate within it. So the next time someone you care about falls silent, don't think they're out of there. Don't read distance as dismissal. Breathe, back off, not in resentment, but in awareness. Understand that what appears to be withdrawal is really a symptom of overwhelm, not indifference. And when you hold space rather than insisting on it, when you remain centered as they find their balance, you're creating something remarkable. You're demonstrating to them that love doesn't have to be a tempest. It can be a stillness. It can be a refuge. Because when emotional overwhelm becomes emotional empathy, that's when true intimacy can start to bloom. And that's when even the most avoidant heart begins to think, maybe this time it's safe to stay. Something about silence is powerful. It can be peaceful or it can be deafening. When you're working with someone who's avoidant, silence can feel like punishment, like a wall of rejection. You extend yourself, you text, you try to connect, and nothing, no reaction, no response. And that void can begin to feel like evidence that they don't care. But the reality is usually far more nuanced and far more human. Silence to an avoidant isn't necessarily ignoring you. Oftentimes, it's their method of self-preservation from feelings they are not yet ready to encounter. Nervous system's equivalent of huddling in a storm, because to them, silence is safety, it's control. One place where they can shut off the cacophony within long enough to stabilize once more. You see, most folks believe that communication is all about words, about talking it out, getting it all off your chest, closing the deal. But avoidants don't work that way. To them, too much emotional release is overwhelming, even frightening. When it gets too hot, when love gets too deep, when conflict gets too close, they withdraw into silence. It's not a lack of caring, it's a struggle for survival. Here's what's interesting: that silence is not often empty, it's packed. Packed with thoughts, packed with fears, packed with internal struggles they can't articulate. While you're asking yourself, why won't they talk to me? They're struggling with questions such as, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I lose control? What if I let them see too much of me and they walk away? Their silence is their armor, but it's also their language. It's how they tell you, I need space to think, I need to feel safe again. And when you can start to grasp that, when you can stop yourself from filling the silence with anxiety or accusation, something amazing happens. You create a moment of peace. You make them know that connection doesn't have to be constant noise, that love can exist even in quiet. Now, let's get real. That's not simple. Silence engages our worst fears. It unleashes that voice in our heads that tells us, I'm being ignored, I'm not enough. But keep in mind, emotional intelligence is not about responding to what is occurring. It's about comprehending why it is occurring. When someone stops speaking, it's not always rejection. Sometimes it's regulation. They're attempting to stabilize themselves, quiet their internal turmoil before they're able to interact with you again. So rather than pursuing, rather than demanding answers they cannot provide yet, what if you made that silence meaningful? What if you utilize that space to connect back to yourself, to breathe, to remind yourself that love is not lost simply because communication stalls? That's the magic of presence. When you are able to remain emotionally grounded as they clam up, you communicate something more powerful than words can. I'm not leaving because it's quiet. I can manage silence. And that makes everything different. Because for an avoidant person, silence has always been threatening, the quiet before the abandonment, the quiet before the loss. But when you ride it out with them, when you don't assail or run away, you teach them something new, that silence doesn't have to end in hurt. It can end in understanding. When an avoidant person goes silent, don't rush to fill the void. Listen differently. Listen with empathy, with patience, with awareness. Ask yourself, what might they be feeling that they can't say right now? Because that mindset, that emotional intelligence, turns silence from a wall into a bridge. And occasionally, what you can most importantly say is nothing. To simply be there, firm on the ground, patient, full of love, that's the loudest thing you can say. That's the thing that says, you don't need to perform for me to love you. You can just be, because the strength in silence isn't found in the lack of noise, it's in the awareness of safety. And when you offer that type of silence, you're not only waiting for them to talk, you're also showing them that love can be quiet, peaceful. When you observe a person who appears emotionally distant, someone who shies away from commitment or shuts down when things get real, it's easy to call them cold, detached, even selfish. But under that armor, under all that self-protection and independence, is one of the strongest fears a human can bear, the fear of abandonment. Ironic, isn't it? The person who appears the most at ease alone is likely to be the most afraid of being abandoned. But that's the way the avoidant pattern goes. Their entire defense system is set up to conceal that fear, even from themselves, because to confess that they fear being abandoned means having to admit that they want to be loved. And wanting something they're afraid of losing is nearly too much to bear. Somewhere in their story, maybe early in life, maybe through a painful breakup, maybe through years of emotional neglect, they learned that love is temporary, that if they rely on someone, they'll be disappointed, that if they show their true self, they'll be rejected. They made a decision. I'll never let anyone have that kind of power over me again. And from that moment, their independence became armor. Their distance became protection. The tragedy is this: the very action they're taking to prevent getting hurt is the one that ensures they will be lonely. They put up walls so no one can abandon them, but in doing that, block out love as well. They desire intimacy, but intimacy is perceived as danger. They put distance between themselves and others, not because they don't care, because they care so much they don't want to lose again. Abandonment fear isn't about weakness. It's about a wound that never had the opportunity to heal. It's an idea that insists, if I let anyone in, they will leave me. If I love too much, they will hurt me. If I rely on someone, they will leave. And that belief dictates every relationship they get into. Pretend they don't need you, but secretly they're observing, waiting to know if you'll depart like all the rest. They'll push, pull away, go silent, not to hurt you, but to shield themselves. It's how they'll ask, will you remain with me even if I'm not flawless? Will you still love me even if I am not capable of being everything you require? But if you do take that personally, the pattern repeats. They pull away, you pursue. They feel smothered, you feel rejected. But if you can look past it, if you can see that their fear isn't about you, but about what has been done to them, all of it changes. You no longer respond to their action and begin to get your head around their pain. That's when love becomes real, when ego is exchanged for empathy. When rather than complaining, why can't you love me the way I need to be loved, you start to say, I can see that you're frightened and I'm not going anywhere. That isn't tolerating disrespect or losing your own identity. It's reframing conflict as compassion. It's building safety, not through speech, but through consistency. Because what's going to fix abandonment issues isn't sweeping gestures, it's small, consistent instances of dependability, being present, holding your ground, remaining calm when they push your buttons. It's showing in your actions that love does not disappear when things are difficult. And here's the beautiful part. Once an avoidant begins to feel that safety, once they realize you're not a threat, that fear begins to soften, the armor starts to crack. And behind it, you'll see someone who's been longing for love just as much as anyone else, someone who's been waiting their whole life to believe that this time love might actually stay. Because when fear confronts patience and defense confronts understanding, the impossible occurs, the avoidant trusts. And that's not merely a relationship miracle, that's a human metamorphosis. What's amazing is that despite all the discussion about avoidant individuals being unavailable or detached, this is reality. They desire connection as much as anyone else. They need love. They need intimacy. They yearn to be seen, to be understood, to be held. They simply don't know how to ask for it. So rather than reaching out, they act out. Rather than saying, please don't leave me, they'll pull away, test you, or act like they're fine. But underneath that tough facade is a silent cry, a cry that says, please don't give up on me. And the problem is, they'll never utter that aloud. They've conditioned themselves against it. Vulnerability is akin to danger, so their pleas emerge sideways through action, through subtle cues, through moments most people don't catch. Perhaps it's a text that reads, hey, how have you been? After they've been mum for weeks. Perhaps it's a tiny question about your day, or an unrelated story they tell just to keep the thread of connection going. On the surface, it appears informal, but hidden underneath is the actual message. I miss you, but I don't know how to tell you. When a person has been hurt so much, when they've come to know that love is pain, their mode of reaching out turns quiet, tentative, almost unheard. That's why it is important to hear the silent cry, because if you only hear what they say, you'll lose out on what their behavior is shouting. Consider this: when an avoidant pushes you away immediately after a moment of closeness, it isn't that they didn't like it, it's because it meant too much. Their feelings became too close, too actual, intense. That withdrawal afterwards, that's their heart speaking, I need to feel safe again before I can manage that kind of intimacy. And sometimes the withdrawal isn't about rejection, it's a call for reassurance, a non-verbal way of asking, please demonstrate to me that I can trust this. Here's the thing: most people miss: avoidance is not the absence of feeling, it's the fear of feeling too deeply. When they act like they don't care, what they're really doing is testing if your care is conditional. They want to see if you'll chase them or condemn them. They want to know if your love can survive their silence, their inconsistency, their confusion. Because inside, that's the only sort of love they do believe in. The one that shows in the still moments. This is not an invitation for you to take disrespect or lose your peace. Compassion is not losing yourself. Compassion is clear seeing, understanding that sometimes resistance is just fear in action. And when you respond to that fear with calmness rather than chaos, you begin to break the pattern. You can't repair someone's hurt, but you can demonstrate safety. You can communicate in your behavior. You don't need to perform for my love. You don't need to chase or hide. I'm here, but I'm not going to make you come to where I am. That stability, that calm assurance, is something an avoidant individual has never known before. And that's what they most require, because their silent cry for connection is not about attention or drama. It's about safety. It's about asking the question, can I trust you to stay when I'm afraid? Can I trust you not to leave when I push you away? And when they finally understand that yes is the answer, when they see that love doesn't disappear in silence or distance, that's when they begin to open. That's when armor is softened, walls are brought down, and for the first time, they believe, maybe I can love and not lose myself. Maybe I can remain. So listen for silence. Notice the little things, quiet words, the subtle stretching, because behind every avoidance distance, there is a heart that's imploring, not with words, but with hope. Please don't give up on me yet. When someone you love begins to pull away, everything in you cries out, go after them! You desire to make it right. You want to reach out, explain, reconnect, make it right. It's only human. When something seems to be getting away, our first impulse is to run after it. But the cold reality is this: the more you pursue an avoidant, the more they'll flee, not because they don't care, but because pressure is perceived as danger. An avoidant does not react to being pursued, they react to safety. They don't require you to pursue them, they require you to invite them. There is a difference. Pursuing conveys, you owe me attention. Invitation conveys, you're safe to return when you're ready. And that distinction is everything. You see, chasing triggers their fear. It signals their nervous system, I'm losing control again. And for someone who's spent a lifetime attempting to remain emotionally safe, that loss of control is too much to bear. They've constructed walls for a purpose: to keep themselves safe from overwhelm, So when you approach them with demands, feelings, rationales, all they sense is threat, not love, not concern, threat. When you make room, peaceful, steady, earthy space, you change the energy altogether. You transition from pursuing to inviting. You're not commanding, you must remain. You're commanding. You're welcome to draw near when you feel safe, and freedom, that's what invites them back. For freedom is the only terrain where authentic connection can thrive. Consider this. None of us want to be pursued into love. We want to be desired. And avoidance particularly require that desire. They want to feel that moving towards is on their terms, not their duty. When you pursue, you fuel their fear of losing control. When you invite, you give them power, the power to choose engagement over avoidance. Now, that's not to say you're passive or apathetic. That's to say you lead from a place of strength, not desperation. You remain open but grounded. You don't beg, you embody. You demonstrate to them with your energy that you can hold space without disintegrating. That's what establishes safety. That's what makes them curious enough to step forward again. I've watched it time and again. Somebody figures out how to quit chasing, how to breathe, how to back off, how to listen to their own peace, and then the avoidant begins reaching out all over again. Not because they were tricked, but because the dynamic has changed from fear to safety. The instant you quit trying to get them to engage, they can at last, because love isn't about control. It's about invitation. It's about saying, I see your fear, and I'm not here to fight it. I'm here to create a space where love can breathe. And let's be honest, that's tough. It's tough to remain calm when all of you is crying out to fix it. It's hard to refrain from reacting when your ego is yelling for validation. But that's where your strength is, because emotional mastery is not about dominating others. It's about managing yourself. It's about saying, I can remain loving even when things are unclear. When you cease to chase, you begin to lead, not by force, but by energy. Your stability communicates, I'm not moving anywhere, but I don't have to chase you either. I trust the connection enough to let it breathe, and that's when it all shifts. That's when the avoidant begins to sense something different, not pressure, not panic, but peace. To understand, maybe I don't have to flee, maybe I can remain close and still feel secure. Next time you catch that urge to chase, pause. Breathe. Remember, love doesn't chase, love invites. Because the strongest energy on the planet isn't the push, it's the peace that pulls. When you move with peace instead of panic, you become magnetic. And that's when even the most avoidant heart starts to lean in, not because it's cornered, but because for the first time it feels safe enough to come home. With love, real, enduring, profound love, nothing is more important than emotional safety. It's the soil in which trust and connection take root, the bedrock of every healthy relationship. Without safety, there is no openness. Without safety, there's only survival. And for the avoidant, that person who tends to pull away the moment things get close, emotional safety isn't just significant, it's everything. You can't require vulnerability from someone who doesn't feel safe. You can't compel openness through pressure, through arguing, or through fear. You can only create the conditions where safety is found, and when safety is found, change occurs naturally. Avoidants aren't avoiding people, they're avoiding pain. They've accumulated a lifetime of coping behaviors in order to stay safe from emotional turmoil. So when love becomes too intense, when the connection is too strong, their body rings the alarm, danger. Pull back. That's not a choice, that's survival programming. Their nervous system is signaling, I don't feel safe. And this is where so many relationships fail. One member believes, if I just love them harder, they'll stay. But love without safety is pressure. It's a trap. The fact is, people don't open up because you love them enough. They open up because they feel safe enough to love you back. So how do you make that kind of safety? It's not about treading on eggshells and never disagreeing. Emotional safety is not about never having conflict. It's about knowing that even when conflict arises, love doesn't dissipate. It's about consistency, presence, emotional maturity. It's about demonstrating that the relationship can withstand even when it becomes uncomfortable. When you can remain even keeled when they pull away, when you can listen in preference to reactivity, when you can acknowledge their feeling without attempting to fix them. You're creating safety. You're showing their nervous system something it's never had before. It's okay. You're safe here. That's when the magic begins. Because if a person feels safe, then they begin to take emotional risks. They begin to open up, to soften, to share. They begin to experiment with trusting again. And once they feel that trust is not going to be punished or betrayed, then the walls start to fall. This is where true transformation starts, not through domination, but through serenity, not through insistence, but through example. Emotional safety is the greatest invitation. It says, you don't need to be perfect here. You don't need to conceal who you are. I can deal with your fears and I won't leave you when they arrive. And now, that doesn't equate to you becoming their therapist or losing yourself in the process of safeguarding their feelings. Emotional safety also encompasses your boundaries. You can't build stability for someone else if you're unstable on the inside. So safety begins with you, your energy, your self-respect, your grounded presence. The firmer your foundation, safer they'll feel in your presence. You want to know what real power looks like in a relationship. It's not control, it's not dominance. It's the ability to stay calm when someone else is spiraling. It's the ability to love without fear, to listen without defensiveness, to hold space without collapsing. That's the kind of strength that heals people. That's the kind of love that requires trust. Because when someone who's fearful of closeness is finally safe in your presence, everything shifts. They start to realize that love doesn't have to mean pain, that connection doesn't have to mean losing their freedom, and gradually, they learn to opt for presence instead of protection, trust over avoidance, love over fear. So keep this in mind. Emotional safety isn't constructed in big things. It's constructed in tiny, repeatable moments, in how you show up when things become heated, in how you remain when it would be easier to flee, in how your voice remains gentle though their fear arrives. Safety isn't the thing you say, it's the thing you are. And when you are that stable, loving, unwavering, you don't only heal the avoidant, you elevate the relationship. Because safety isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning of love that finally feels like home. One of the biggest challenges in loving somebody who's avoidant, or honestly in any relationship, is figuring out how to love without losing yourself. Because when you really love someone who's constantly pulling away, it's so easy to begin chasing, overgiving, or shrinking yourself to keep the relationship. You get into this thinking of, if I just love them more, if I just keep being patient, if I just keep showing them I'm safe, then eventually they'll open up. That's not love, that's self-abandonment. And here's the truth. You cannot build authentic connection by disconnecting from yourself. You cannot build safety for another and create danger for yourself. The intention isn't to get lost in loving them, it's to remain rooted in your own power while bringing them into it. When you overstep, when you make their healing your cause, you begin to send a message, not only to them, but to you, that your peace is less important than their comfort. And that's a toxic cycle. Because love that's founded on imbalance does not endure. It exhausts you. It transforms connection into control and compassion into burnout. Real love doesn't require you to vanish. It requires you to become more yourself. The most powerful relationships are not between two human beings trying to fill in the gaps. They're between two fully formed human beings who decide to grow together. And if you need to love an avoidant, that is the energy they require from you, not dependency, not neediness, but quiet confidence. The kind of presence that says, I love you. I'm not afraid to stand on my own 2 feet. You see, avoidants don't respond to pressure, but they respect stability. They might not say it out loud, but when they feel your grounded energy, when they see that you're not trying to fix them, not begging for attention, not losing your center, they feel safer. Because deep down, what they fear most isn't love, it's losing themselves inside it. So when you remain anchored in who you are, when you hold on to your passions, your friendships, your peace, you're demonstrating that love doesn't have to engulf either of you. You're showing them what healthy interdependence is, two people who can lean on each other without toppling over. Let me share something strong with you. Boundaries aren't rejection. Boundaries are clarity. They're the structure of love. They dictate, this is where I end and you start, and we both can be safe within that boundary. Boundaries don't repel individuals. They set up the conditions where each person can thrive, because love without boundaries isn't love, it's chaos. You can have empathy and tell the avoidant, I won't give up myself in order to prove my love. You can offer understanding without sacrificing your peace. And that equilibrium, that firm combination of empathy and strength, is what heals relationships. It teaches the avoidant that love does not equate to losing liberty. It equates to discovering refuge within connection. Remember this, you teach others how to treat you by how you treat yourself. When you respect your feelings, when you tell the truth, when you keep your peace, you're giving a message that says, love is strong, but it's not designed to hurt. So don't shrink yourself to make someone else comfortable. Don't shut your needs up to maintain peace. Don't pursue love that makes you betray yourself. Because once you begin losing yourself in order to keep someone else near, you've already lost the most significant relationship, the one with yourself. And here's the lovely paradox: when you cease to pursue, when you stand in your value, when you indicate that you're capable of loving without losing yourself, then true attraction is possible. Because authenticity is attractive, confidence is soothing, strength is secure. Avoidance starts to realize that love is not about surrender, it's about choice. And when both of you can choose love from a place of wholeness, that's when the relationship ceases to be a battlefield and begins to be a partnership. Because the best love stories are not about losing yourself for someone else. They're about discovering yourself with another person and learning that love doesn't steal your power, it adds to it. When we discuss love, true love, kind that changes you, we need to discuss healing, because all relationships consist of two stories, two histories, two patterns that intersect. And when those patterns intersect, they either reenact the past or rewrite it. Healing, especially when you're loving someone who's avoidant, isn't about fixing them, it's about breaking the pattern together. You understand, relationships they reflect the parts of ourselves we've hidden, the wounds we've turned a blind eye to, the fears we've been fleeing. When you're with an avoidant, their withdrawing will activate your fear of abandonment. When you withdraw back, it'll activate their fear of rejection. And round it goes, fear fueling fear, until both of you are dancing to an old tune neither of you consciously selected. But here's the truth: the pattern doesn't have to define you. It's not a life sentence, it's an invitation. Invitation to rise above fear, to build something new. Because real healing happens not when one person changes, but when both people become aware. When both say, I see my triggers, and I'm ready to take responsibility for them. For the avoidant, recovery starts with courage, courage to encounter vulnerability, to open up, to be known. For the partner, recovery starts with strength, strength to remain calm, to provide space, to love without losing themselves. And when both individuals get into that level of awareness, relationship is transformed from power struggle to partnership. The trick is this: healing the pattern is not blame, it's about comprehension. It's about substituting. You always pull away. For I see that you're afraid and I get it. It's about substituting. You never open up. For I understand it's difficult for you to trust, but I'm here. When you shift from accusation to awareness, you flip the entire dynamic. You cease fighting each other and begin battling the pattern together. That's when love turns into growth. That's when intimacy turns into evolution, because relationships aren't supposed to be perfect. They're supposed to be transformational. They're not about finding someone who never gets under your skin. They're about finding someone who's willing to grow through the under her skin moments with you. Now, here's what most people don't know: healing takes time. It's not an overnight thing, it's a practice. It's being kind when you could be critical. It's showing up when you want to flee. It's responding instead of reacting, again and again, until the old pattern fizzles. And yes, it requires patience. It requires emotional honesty. It requires both of you to be willing to say, this frightens me, but I want to be able to see it. That is vulnerability, not weakness, but strength. Because when two people can face their fears rather than turn away from them, that's where trust starts to be built. And as that trust increases, so does the love. The avoidant begins to see perhaps closeness doesn't have to be painful. The partner starts to notice, I can love deeply without disappearing. And they begin together to build something new, a love not based on fear, freedom. Because the truth is, there's either repetition or rebirth in every relationship. You can just keep repeating the old script, the one in which fear triumphs, or you can create a new one where love and consciousness prevail. And that decision is yours to make, both of you. Healing isn't one person doing the work for both. It's both people doing their own work for the relationship. It's meeting each other halfway, not in perfection, but in honesty. It's saying, we both have wounds, but we're not going to let them run this story anymore. And that's when you stop surviving love and start constructing it. That's when two people become a team. Not against, but for each other. Because healing the pattern together isn't just about transforming how you love, it's about transforming what love means. From fear to freedom, from defense to trust, from pain to peace, that's when love becomes not just a feeling, but a force, one powerful enough to rewrite the past and create a future that feels like home. At the end of the day, everything comes down to understanding. Not just understanding your partner, but understanding yourself. Because love isn't about control, it's about consciousness, about having clarity, your patterns, your fears, your needs, and getting it that the person standing in front of you isn't your enemy, they're your mirror. And once you get that, the entire game is different. When you really see an avoidant, when you notice the fear behind the space, the hunger behind the quiet, something in you relaxes. You cease to take everything personally. You cease to interpret their pulling away as rejection and begin to understand it as defense. That change in perception marks the start of change. Knowing doesn't equate to excusing their action, and it doesn't equate to settling for less than you are worthy of. It means learning to react with wisdom rather than emotion. It means embracing compassion and responsibility in the same breath. It means being able to say, I see you're hurt, but I also know my value. That isn't weakness, that's empowerment. Because love without understanding is chaos. It's two people lost in their own stories, hoping the other one will come along and make them feel safe. But love with understanding, that's conscious love. That's where healing occurs. That's where both people stop fighting for control and begin fighting for connection. Understanding transforms everything. It takes pain and turns it into purpose. It takes distance and turns it into dialogue. It takes old triggers and turns them into new levels of awareness. You stop trying to win arguments and start trying to win each other back. And that's what real transformation is like, not faking that the pain never existed, but deciding to learn from it. It's being able to see that every difficult moment was a chance to know each other better. It's believing that love doesn't always appear beautiful, but when it's true, it instructs, it makes you better. It challenges you to become more. Perhaps the avoidant person in your life isn't being mean-spirited. Perhaps they're protecting themselves the only way they can. Perhaps their silence isn't rejection, fear of not doing it right. Perhaps the distance isn't disinterest, but confusion. And when you look at that with clear eyes, when you get the human behind the act, you move out of judgment and into compassion. And understanding and not control is what makes things change. When individuals feel looked at, when they feel they are in safety, they begin to develop. When they feel heard rather than examined, accepted rather than judged, they begin to discard their armor. For no one can heal while they're being assaulted, but anyone can heal when they are understood. That's the change we're discussing here, from reaction to reflection, from fear to freedom, from pain to power. Because when you work from understanding, you're not anymore attempting to get love, you're becoming love. You're living in the energy that heals, and that's when it all flips, not only in your relationship, but in your life. Because the way you love is the way you live. When you get to see instead of judge, to connect rather than control, you begin to show up differently in all areas. With your friends, your family, your kids, your work, yourself. So the next time an avoidant pulls away or a loved one shuts down, stop, breathe. Don't respond from the old story. Ask yourself, what's really going on here? What am they scared of? What am I scared of? And in that moment of awareness, you've already changed the energy. You've already stopped the cycle. Because love is not about fixing someone, it's about setting them free. It's about recognizing that we all have walls, but beneath those walls is the same hunger to be loved, to be safe, to be seen. And when you can see that, when you can love from that place, you don't just change your relationship, you change your world. So take note of this. Love flourishes where understanding resides. Compassion begets connection. And change starts the instant you decide to see not only the behavior, but the heart behind it. Undefined, that's where real healing starts. That's when love ceases to be a battlefield and begins to be a home.